The National Hurricane Center issues urgent warnings for South Carolina about a massive storm. The weather is getting worse every second, so people living in coastal towns are told to leave immediately. In the town of Annieville, a girl named Dakota tries to order some takeout food, but her favorite restaurant tells her they are closing down because of the bad storm. Dakota has agoraphobia, which means she is terrified of going outside. However, because she desperately needs something to eat, she forces herself to leave her late mother's house anyway. As Dakota walks down the street, she notices all her neighbors packing their belongings and leaving their homes. Suddenly, a fire truck speeds past with a loud, blaring siren. This triggers a severe panic attack for Dakota, making her decide to turn back. On her way home, she accidentally bumps into a neighbor. The neighbor tells her about the mandatory evacuation and offers her a seat in his car. The idea of getting into a car with someone terrifies her, so she refuses and goes back inside her house instead. On the other side of town, 3 siblings are having fun swimming together in a swamp. One of them, Ron, takes a huge leap into the water and does not come back up for a while. His siblings get worried for a moment, but it turns out Ron was just playing a prank on them when he finally pops back up. Their fun is cut short by their foster father, Billy, who angrily scolds them for playing in dangerous swamp waters. Billy warns them about how expensive medical bills can be if they get hurt. However, one of the girls, Dee, talks back and says she does not believe he would ever take them to a doctor anyway. Her comment gets her into even more trouble, and an angry Billy forces all 3 siblings into his truck to take them home. Over at a local meat plant, a pregnant worker named Lisa rushes out to her car. She says goodbye to her coworker Bob, who has to stay behind until he finishes all his chores. As Lisa drives away, her mother calls her on the phone. Her mother is upset because Lisa moved all the way from New York to Annieville for a fiancé who abandoned her as soon as she got pregnant. Her mother also warns her that the main highways are closed, so Lisa needs to find higher ground right away. Down at the port, a marine biologist named Dale explains to his coworker Brian that marine animals are already swimming north to run away from the coming storm. This includes the local sharks, which means the team did not get a chance to tag all of them in time. Soon, Harbor Master Greg arrives and breaks the news that the hurricane has upgraded to a dangerous Category 6. Hearing this, Dale immediately calls his niece, Dakota. Dakota is still sitting near her front door when her phone rings. Dale offers to drive over and pick her up, but Dakota refuses to leave her house, even when Dale describes the awful flooding that is about to happen. He tells her he understands how much she misses her late mother because he misses her too, but hiding inside the house will not make the sadness go away. Dakota just laughs it off and jokes that he is terrible at giving parental advice. Dale promises he will come get her anyway before hanging up. To distract herself, Dakota tries watching television, but every single channel is interrupted by emergency news updates about the approaching storm. Giving up on live TV, she connects her mobile phone to the screen to watch old family videos instead. Meanwhile, inside his truck, Billy continues to yell at the foster kids. He hurls insults at them and threatens to send them back into the foster care system. Looking out the truck window, Ron sees crowd after crowd of people fleeing the area and asks if they should evacuate, too. Billy dismisses his worries, claiming it is just a bit of rain and wind, and turns up the radio music happily. When they finally arrive at their house, Dee voices her concern about the windows shattering in the storm. Billy proudly tells her he installed special reinforced glass that cannot break. Billy goes down to the basement to find his wife, Rachel, and complains about the kids' behavior. Rachel asks him to calm down and reminds him that they receive money from the government to look after the children. Dee walks into the basement to tell them the kids are hungry, and she notices expensive steaks inside the basement refrigerator. Billy angrily tells her to mind her own business, while Rachel throws a plain piece of bread at her and sternly warns her that the basement is completely off limits. Back at the port, a news reporter named Joe approaches Dale to ask for his professional opinion on a shark attack that happened earlier that morning. Dale has not heard about it yet, so Joe explains that a couple on the beach was attacked by a great white shark, and some witnesses even claimed they saw a pair of sharks. Dale corrects him, explaining that great whites do not hunt in packs, so the attackers were likely bull sharks. Joe takes the microphone back and begins reporting fake, dramatic facts about bull sharks to create a clickbait story. Dale tries to correct his lies, but when Joe completely ignores him, Dale walks away in frustration. Meanwhile, Lisa is driving around trying to find an open store for help, but the streets are entirely deserted. Her mother calls again to check up on her, but the phone's signal dies mid-conversation. Feeling a sharp pain in her stomach, Lisa blames it on stress and turns on some music to help herself relax. As powerful wind gusts begin destroying nearby buildings, the main power grid goes down. Massive waves crash violently against the beach, eventually breaking through the protective levees. Floodwaters quickly pour into the town streets. Lisa drives as fast as she can and nearly collides with a truck, barely slamming her brakes in time. The driver turns out to be Bob, who shouts at her to turn around because fallen trees are blocking the path ahead. With floodwaters closing in fast from behind her, Lisa decides to press forward anyway, but her car ends up getting jammed against a fallen tree. Bob drives off in the opposite direction to take a side turn, but a sudden surge of water hits his truck full force. The current drags his vehicle down the street, crashing it into light poles and buildings. Lisa watches in horror as Bob's truck is pushed directly toward her stuck car, but she cannot break her vehicle free. The rushing wave smashes Bob's truck into Lisa's car, finally dislodging it. The strong current sweeps Lisa's car down the flooded street until it crashes hard into another tree, sending a large branch smashing through the window. Water starts filling up the vehicle, and Lisa is trapped inside, unable to escape. At the same time, the current pushes Bob's truck into a decorative statue, cracking open the truck's storage tank. Hundreds of gallons of liquid fish chum spill out into the floodwaters. The bloody mixture quickly washes out toward the ocean, attracting a horde of hungry sharks. Over at Billy's house, the children watch as water floods their yard. Rachel tries to tell her husband they need to leave, but Billy ignores her warnings. Suddenly, a massive wave smashes right through their reinforced window, knocking Billy off his feet. Rachel wants to escape, but Billy has no plan. Ron reminds them that their truck has a snorkel attachment that allows it to drive through deep water. Back at Dakota's house, she sees the water coming and steps away from the window moments before the flood crashes into her ground floor. She runs up to the second floor for safety. Looking out her top floor window, Dakota spots Lisa trapped inside her submerged car. Nearby, two men on a small boat named Scott and Jimmy hear Lisa screaming for help. Scott dives into the floodwaters and swims toward the vehicle. He climbs onto the hood and tries to pull the tree branch away, but a strong wind gust knocks him back into the water. Scott yells to Jimmy to grab a pair of cutters from their truck. While Jimmy swims over to get the tools, Scott talks to Lisa to keep her calm. Jimmy finds the cutters and jumps back into the water, but mid-swim, he is suddenly dragged beneath the surface. Scott turns around and notices his friend has vanished. As Scott goes searching for him, Jimmy pops up screaming frantically. His entire arm has been bitten off. A hidden force pulls Jimmy under again. Dakota spots a shark fin in the water and opens her window to scream a warning, but Scott cannot hear her over the storm. Lisa hears Dakota's screams and starts shouting a warning to Scott as well. Inside his wrecked truck, Bob hears the commotion, kicks his door open, and steps out into the water to help. However, the moment he steps into the flood, a giant shark grabs him in its jaws. Bob tries to fight it off, but the beast drags him under. Scott finally spots the massive shark and tries to swim away, but the beast grabs him, slams him repeatedly against Lisa's car, and pulls him under the water. Meanwhile, aboard their boat, Dale and Brian monitor the news. They learn that the Coast Guard has banned all watercraft from leaving the port for the next 12 hours due to dangerous winds and rough currents. They also hear that Annieville is completely underwater with multiple casualties reported, leaving Dale terrified for Dakota's safety. Checking their computer's tracking map, Dale realizes the town flooded because the levees failed. A few minutes later, Dale and Brian are inside a car with the news reporter Joe and his cameraman. They made a deal. If Joe drives them and hauls their boat to Annieville, Dale will let him film the rescue mission live. Back at Billy's house, Billy and Rachel wade through the deep indoor water toward the garage. The kids watch from a window and freeze in terror when they spot a shark swimming through their house. When Billy reaches the garage car, a shark suddenly leaps out of the water, bites his arm, and pulls him under. After severing Billy's hand, the shark slams into Rachel and devours her. The kids watch the gruesome scene from the window, screaming for help. Billy resurfaces, looks directly at the terrified children for a moment, and decides to abandon them to save himself by running toward his truck. Just as Billy reaches the truck door, the shark lunges up and grabs him again. Seconds later, the kids are startled when Rachel's body briefly floats up to the window, only for the shark to drag her back under. Over in her car, Lisa is on the verge of drowning. Dakota tries calling emergency services, but nobody answers the phones. Lisa screams for help, but Dakota hesitates, pointing out that the water is full of man-eating sharks. When Lisa desperately shouts that she is pregnant, Dakota suffers a sudden anxiety attack. However, she manages to ground herself and agrees to risk her life. She walks downstairs, carefully stepping across floating furniture to reach the kitchen and grab a sharp knife. Dakota then exits through an upper window, but she loses her footing and slips into the floodwaters. Fortunately, Dakota manages to grab onto a floating car and climb on top. Carefully watching the water for fins, she leaps from one floating structure to another until she reaches Lisa's car. Using the knife, she hacks away at the car's roof and cuts the heavy tree branches. She then pulls the pregnant woman out through the hole in the roof, and together, they wade back into Dakota's house. Inside, Dakota hands Lisa a dry towel and mentions that she lives completely alone because both of her parents have passed away. Lisa suggests they head up to the roof to signal for rescue, but she is suddenly stopped by intense labor contractions. Dakota rips down the window curtains, runs up to the roof, and arranges the fabric to spell out "Help" in giant letters. When Dakota returns to the bedroom, Lisa asks her to check her body to see how far along the delivery is. Dakota takes a look and reveals that the baby's head is already sticking out 2 or 3 inches, meaning the baby is arriving almost immediately. Meanwhile, out on the water, Brian tracks his marine system and discovers that a tagged shark named Nellie is heading right toward Dakota's house. Joe asks who Nellie is, and Dale explains that Nellie is a massive, pregnant great white shark they have been tracking for 3 years. Suddenly, their transport vehicle stalls out because the road ahead is completely submerged. The team unhooks the boat to continue by water, but Brian discovers the internet connection has failed, wiping out their tracking map. They are forced to navigate the flooded town completely blind. As they launch the boat, Dale calls Harbor Master Greg to double-check their direction. Greg confirms they are headed the right way, but warns them to get out as fast as possible. As they steer through the submerged streets, they pass the floating remains of animals devoured by the incoming sharks. Back at the siblings' house, the 3 kids are perched on top of a dining table to stay above the rising water. They notice a front door has swung open and worry that sharks will swim inside, so Dee starts climbing across floating furniture to shut it. Right as she reaches for the handle, a shark slams into the door, pushing it wide open. Dee barely hangs onto the frame and begins losing her grip. Ron waits for the shark to swim into another room, then carefully moves across the furniture to reach his sister just in time, pulling her up before she falls into the water. Once they are back on top of the table, Ron argues that they need to climb onto the roof. His siblings are too terrified to move, but Ron reminds them that the water level keeps rising and 2 sharks are circling the room. He says they need a distraction to get past them, and Dee remembers there is fresh meat stored in the basement fridge. Will reminds them that Billy forbade them from going down there, but Ron points out that the adults are dead. The 3 kids start laughing and mocking Billy for how horribly he treated them, when suddenly a bloody Billy bursts out of the water and climbs onto the table. Billy asks where Rachel is, and Ron tells him she died, angrily calling him out for abandoning them. Billy lies and claims he was going to come back with help, but the kids refuse to believe him. He tries to force the children into the water, claiming sharks do not like the taste of kids. At that moment, Will spots a floating envelope in the water. He opens it and finds the monthly government foster check. The siblings realize that Billy and Rachel only kept them around for money, feeding them cheap bread while hoarding expensive food and spending the rest on themselves. Billy tries to deny it and claims he loves them, but when the kids scoff, he loses his temper, insults them, and demands that Ron jump into the water. Ron snaps, hurls insults right back at Billy, and tells him to jump in himself. When Billy tries to punch him, Ron blocks the hit, and Dee kicks Billy hard in the face, sending him tumbling into the water. The sharks immediately swarm Billy and tear him apart. Ron uses the bloody distraction to dive into the water and swim down into the basement. Ron grabs a few supplies from the basement, but as he turns to leave, his sweater gets caught on a wall hook. A shark swims into the doorway, so Ron throws a paint bucket into the water to distract it, rips his sweater off the hook, and swims for his life. He scrambled back onto the table just in time to dodge the shark's snapping jaws. He opens the box he grabbed and finds sticks of dynamite inside. Meanwhile, the floodwaters reach the second floor of Dakota's house, and Lisa's labor pains grow unbearable. A desperate Dakota realizes she needs to retrieve Scott's abandoned boat. She remembers her uncle telling her that vibrations can fool sharks by mimicking the distress signals of dying fish. She collects several vibrating items, like electric toothbrushes, seals them inside plastic bags, and tosses them into the water. While the sharks are distracted by the buzzing bags, Dakota slips into the water and carefully moves between floating objects. She has a flashlight strapped to her head, and whenever she spots a shark shadow, she freezes or swims around it. Suddenly, her headlamp flickers out. She smacks it until it turns back on, only to be terrified by a floating dead body right in front of her. After eating the plastic bags, two sharks swim directly toward Dakota. She is forced to spread her legs wide and stay completely still while one shark swims right between them without attacking. Once the sharks swim away, she finally reaches Scott's boat and climbs aboard. Meanwhile, out on the water, Dale shares the story of why he became a shark researcher with his team. He explains that the most dangerous river animals are actually hippos. Years ago, a hippo was about to attack Dale, but two sharks suddenly lunged out of the water and dragged the hippo down. For the first time, Dale saw pure terror in a hippo's eyes, realizing that the only thing sharks fear is an even bigger shark, though strong electrical currents can disorient them, too. At that moment, Brian's computer signal comes back online, showing that the entire town is swarming with sharks. Nearby, they spot a submerged SWAT vehicle, and Dale notices high-powered stun tasers inside. As the sun rises, the structural damage to Dakota's house causes the building to slowly collapse. The water level has risen so high that Lisa is nearly pinned against the ceiling. Hearing her desperate cries, Dakota breaks a neighbor's window to steal a harpoon gun. Lisa feels the baby coming out and plays music on her phone to stay calm. As she tries to give birth, the house structure completely collapses, forcing her to roll off the floating bed into the water. Luckily, she can swim and pops back up right as her baby is born into the flood. She pulls the newborn to her chest immediately. However, the baby's crying instantly attracts a nearby shark. As the beast swims toward them, Lisa grabs a sharp piece of wooden debris and stabs the shark to defend her child. A second shark creeps up behind Lisa, but Dakota arrives just in time on the boat, firing the harpoon gun directly into the shark's face and forcing it to retreat. Dakota rows closer to pull Lisa and the baby aboard, but a shark rams the side of the boat, knocking everyone into the water. Right at that moment, Dale's rescue boat arrives. Dale turns on a high-voltage taser and drops it into the flood, sending a shockwave through the water that frightens the sharks away. However, the shark that Lisa stabbed returns, furious and aiming to kill. Suddenly, the giant pregnant great white, Nellie, leaps out of the water, catches the attacking shark in her massive jaws, and rips it apart. At the kids' house, the siblings use duct tape to strap the basement meat to the sticks of dynamite. They light the fuse and throw it into the water, but none of the sharks come to take the bait. Will remembers watching a documentary that explained sharks are drawn to water vibrations. The three siblings jump into the shallow water and bounce up and down to make splash vibrations until the sharks finally charge into the room. Will and Dee scramble to safety immediately, but Ron's sweater gets snagged on an object again. He narrowly dodges a shark strike, rips his sweater free, and dives behind a heavy table with his siblings. The hungry sharks cluster around the baited dynamite, which explodes moments later, killing all the sharks in a violent spray of blood. On a nearby counter, Will finds Billy's truck keys. The three surviving siblings climb into Billy's truck and drive away to safety. After Lisa, her baby, and Dakota are pulled into Dale's boat, uncle and niece share an emotional reunion hug. Brian lends his phone to Lisa so she can call her mother, let her know they are safe, and introduce her to her new grandchild. Joe keeps his camera rolling, capturing the whole rescue as they row towards safety. Sometime later, Harbor Master Greg checks his weather monitors and notices yet another massive hurricane brewing on the horizon. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.